Okay, we'll kind of go ahead and get moving here. Go ahead and just put yourself on mute while you're kind of not participating or not talking, just so we don't get kind of overwhelmed with the background noises. But thanks everyone for coming and showing up early on Friday. As you all hopefully know at this point, instead of doing kind of the regular presentation, we're going to be doing more of a roundtable discussion just about the COVID situation and how that's all looking for us, particularly with working from home while doing housing work. So a few reminders before we get going on that. This is a roundtable, so we want it to be a discussion. So please feel free to either pop something in the chat or just go ahead and unmute yourself and shout it out. We've got a few like general topics to cover, but if anyone has like specific questions or concerns or things they want to talk through, like please go for it. Don't forget to fill out the feedback form before we're done. That'll get thrown in the chat kind of right at the end, and that'll just help us figure out kind of moving forward. Does this work? Is there a different way we want to do this? Are there more things in this topic that we need to cover? So just keep an eye out for that, and then we will be recording this so we can post it to YouTube for people to go back and watch the same way we do with the presentations. So if you like have any concerns or weirdness about that, just feel free to turn your video off. And if you're not comfortable with your voice being recorded, just go ahead and use that chat. So getting started, is there anything that anyone wants to talk about specifically? Any like burning questions? Any kind of like primary topics that you just like really are interested in hearing what people are doing, really want to ask about, anything like that? And feel free to just go for it. If not, we'll jump into some of our kind of more general topics. Yeah, so chat us in the chat. How are people engaging in self-care during all this?
I think that's a great question. I can jump in. Yeah, I'm Chris Mann. I work at Mount Royal University. I think it's a weird time for us to, like, I don't know, I'm working from home personally. I'm guessing other people are working from home, and it's kind of odd to be not leaving a whole lot, and to, like, often my self-care was going to the gym and things like that can't really do right now. So I guess just trying to maintain some normalcy. My girlfriend and I have created kind of a list of like movies we want to watch and things we want to do, even if they're just at home. So I guess that's kind of our self-care right now, but I'd love to hear some other people's.
Yeah, so for anyone just popping in now, the current topic is kind of how you're handling self-care during this time.
I'm happy to jump on if that's okay. My name's Nathan. I work at Simon Fraser University, NBC. Self-care for me is coming in the form of, and my fiance made a comment this morning of, hey, why'd you get dressed up today? You got nowhere to go. And for me, it was like, no, I want to throw on something nice just to, yes, I don't have a video call outside of this today, but sometimes putting on the nicer work clothes versus I did wear a hoodie yesterday, or will fully acknowledge I wore that hoodie yesterday. It's just helping a little bit as I find to try to find some normalcy during this period of time, and I think that's important as well.
Yeah, a response from Catherine in the chat about keeping routines to help maintain some of that sanity. So similar to that of like getting dressed up or like making coffee the same way you would, just kind of trying to keep yourself on the same schedule, it sounds like. All the coffee. Any other kind of thoughts, feelings around like the self-care piece? Okay, so another topic popped in the chat from Nicole. How are institutions approaching common areas, public spaces, in terms of like locking them down, restricting access, all that jazz. I can go ahead and speak to that really quickly. So we have closed our public areas. We have spaces that usually are open like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and we closed those pretty early on. We've also closed all of our social lounges on our floors. So those have been locked, so students can't go into those. Both to like discourage like large groups gathering, but also to just kind of minimize like the custodial work happening in the building, with how much extra like sanitizing and, you know, like kind of narrowing in on pieces that we have. We just decided that that was something that was worth kind of pulling away from the students to keep the rest of the building a little safer. Anyone else want to talk about kind of what they're doing with lounges, public spaces, all that deal?
This is I don't know if this would just be helpful if you all have some tips and tricks as you're in large groups, but we've been sort of doing a speakers list when we do these kinds of conversations to help like that feeling of, am I about to speak over someone? And so if you want to put like an X and Becca or someone can be like, oh, this person wants to talk. Sometimes that helps with that like Zoom large group chat anxiety. So that's sometimes what I do. But for us, I work at Washington State University. We have really been balancing that. We have students still in our halls, and public lounges are sometimes spaces where they can social distance, right? If they are using common bathrooms, if they have roommates, like sometimes you just need to be away from someone. And so the common lounges are important for us because they can be those larger spaces, and we have our custodial team doing phenomenal jobs of extra cleaning. And, you know, we're working on university approved signage, which just kind of educates around social distancing. And then our student staff are working to make sure, like, we're not telling people, hey, get back to your room, but it's more of a make sure that you are staying that, you know, appropriate distance apart, you know, make sure that you are being aware of what you're touching and those kinds of things. Because I think for us, it's still that balance of how are we allowing people to have space and agency in the space they're living in without taking that away or, you know, doing that kind of stuff.
Definitely. So Mark said in the chat that they have limited public spaces, they're cleaning laundry rooms and elevators daily as usual, as well as wiping down high-touch door handles daily. Anyone else able to share kind of how they're handling some of those shared spaces in their buildings? If you're still open, I guess, for that matter.
I can chime in super fast. So we're still open. Sorry, I'm Holly from Willamette in Oregon. We are still open, and a lot of our residence hall spaces have been on lockdown. In a lot of the academic buildings, they've actually removed the furniture. So students cannot sit there, but they're still finding a way. They're still sitting on the ground and chatting that way. But for the most part, we've moved to a similar model of just locking things down and asking people to leave.
They're removing the furniture is an interesting touch. So Kurt asked, how is housing supporting larger university COVID triage efforts? Kurt, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm usually calling into my meetings through my phone and not using my speaker on my computer. Anyway, well, what I'm wondering is you're hearing things in the press about residence halls that are actually being converted into almost bed space for patients or these. That's what I mean by the larger triage efforts on the university. Is anybody having to support the larger efforts versus just supporting the students that live in the residence hall?
Yeah, I'll chime in again. Willamette is right next door to a hospital, and so we've been asked, and we are not necessarily prepared to handle incoming patients, but more a space for people who are working at the hospital if they've been working a really long shift, coming to one of our apartments, preferably to kind of just sleep and then get back to work. That hasn't been enacted yet, but it's still something that we are really talking about because the hospital is right across the street.
Jasmine says that their school has converted 2 residence halls to space for local hospital employees, as well as it looks like at Linfield College, they're kind of in that process. Has anyone else been in communication with their broader community, whether that be like their local or county government, or like hospitals or something like that? Just having those communications about what that support might look like or what it means to potentially still have students so close to those spaces? Yeah, so Bob says they're kind of preparing to make some of those transitions over. Catherine says that they are having those daily calls, talking to like campus, city, and county reps. I know that's been similar here at Bellevue College as well. There's a food team that meets daily and kind of has that rolling conversation. Awesome. Well, moving into kind of some of our other questions then, how has the COVID situation changed your staffing model in terms of student staff and kind of response to incidents or concerns in the building?
At the University of Washington, we've kind of issued new guidance for our RA on-call staff who are still serving on call around incident response or supporting students of concern, and it outlines different safety protocols to take when responding to an incident. So they still go on rounds, but they're given gloves to use, and if they encounter a situation, they're then instructed on staying at the door, taking this a step back and trying to communicate, and knowing that like they're not going to go in the space and necessarily look or like asked in the same way that they typically would. And so we have a pretty like healthy list of kind of instructions there for that.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, very similarly, we've actually we had a lot of staff actually leave. We offered that to them if they wanted to, so we dropped down to about a half team now, while we have a lot less students in residence. But one thing we're actually not having them go on rounds right now because we don't find it's necessary. We know students are going to call in if they need anything, and then very similarly. We've kind of looked at making sure there's like lots of gloves, masks if they would like them in the bags, the few that we have, and then continuing that any kind of thing that we haven't seen yet, any kind of response that maybe someone hasn't dealt with yet, they are calling. For us, it's the RLC on call to kind of talk about what that response should look like, making sure they know they should not be entering any units, they should be taking that step back, and making sure they're comfortable with anything. And if they're not comfortable assessing a situation, then a professional staff will go and deal with that. We just want to make sure that safety, as everyone else is kind of thinking, is paramount.
Excellent. Nicole.
My mic's good. Similar to kind of Chris, which makes sense. We are in the same city. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole at the University of Calgary. We've dropped the rounds requirement, and actually, as of Monday this week, we switched to a 24-hour on-call mode where we have a pair. We've split our kind of campus in half and like dissolved traditional building teams to make like an East team and a West team, basically. And with that, it's only if you get the call, you go respond. But again, because it's 24-hour, that could happen anytime. One thing we've also done is with the actual bags that they're used to having to carry around, we've instead placed them in like central staff rooms in different buildings. So when you're handing the phone and the master keys off to the next staff person like each day, you are only having to do that. And we've provided them all with literally wipes and have suggested we even like a sample. Here's a video of me standing at this side of the table, sanitizing the phone and keys, and then passing it along the table to the other end to someone, just to show like how we can model proper distancing. And we've been keeping just those wipes in those staff rooms so that way they don't have to take that big bag with them. But if they get a call, they can go into the building and grab the supply as necessary, instead, to just try to mitigate the fewer like things that you have to touch while you're on call. And then similarly, our campus security is also kind of helping triage when possible if like staff are just feeling really uncomfortable.
Joey?
Hi, my name is Joey. I'm from Portland State University. We're kind of doing things differently. We have RAs that have left, but also have RAs here, but they're no longer serving on call. We have all of our on-call phones forward to the pro staff's phone that's on campus. So pro staff are the only ones responding to incidents. We shut down our front desk, and we have critical staff, which is our director and our associate director of residential life, that are serving there on an alternating schedule. And so during business hours, we're sending students to the desk to get a key from them to limit contact. And then after hours, pro staff on call are responding to anything. Pro staff are also, for the RDs, we are doing community walks once a day through the buildings just to make sure no maintenance issues are arising or anything like that. And then the RAs that stayed with us, they are also doing community walks in the evenings after hours. But if they do come across anything, any policy violations or anything like that, they've been instructed to call the pro staff, and pro staff have to respond and address those issues with the residents to limit the contact of our students interacting with the residents on campus. And then our campus public safety is also doing extra rounds as well through our buildings.
Awesome. For those folks who just shared, and also maybe for folks sharing kind of in the rest of this, can you also speak to sort of where your occupancy is at, and sort of how many residents you have as you've been making those decisions?
I can jump back in over here. We switched to 24-hour on-call, and we're at about 1,000-ish people living, majority of them being international.
Awesome. So, Joey, you mentioned that you've closed your front desk. How has anyone else dealt with sort of desk staffing, and what that's looked like in terms of if you've had like check-ins or checkouts, or other like resources that students usually get from that desk space? Kathleen?
Hi. So Linfield is down to about 50 living on campus right now. We trimmed as much as we possibly could. And so we've closed our Res Life office completely, and most other offices on campus are closed as well. But we've been finding ways to forward our office phones to our emails or our personal phones. And then we have CPS that are here all the time doing walkouts and things like that. Or if a student needs to get into their room to get their stuff to move out, they can do that. And we have express checkout for any students who are coming in. We have about 65 RAs in total. Only 5 are staying on campus. So all of the students who are left on campus are being consolidated to an apartment area near the end of this week. We'll move them over. And then our other RAs have moved into an ERA role to focus on one-on-ones and programming.
Awesome. Joey?
Yeah, so we, for our front desk, and I put in the chat, we're about to 500, 600 residents. Traditionally, we had around 1,800. But we, all packages we're not accepting any packages. So all students have to utilize, we have an Amazon locker right around the corner because we are in a urban environment. So we're encouraging Amazon lockers, and then we have worked with the post office and the students that if they are ordering packages, they need to contact the post office hub around our campus to let them know to hold it there for pickup. So we're not accepting any packages, and then that's really all that we offer at our front desk besides cart move outs. But when we had our move out, we didn't offer carts to anybody, and we were very transparent with that and our reasoning behind that. So a lot of the students didn't really seem to have any issues with that. And then when we closed and we offered the opportunity to cancel spring contracts for full refund, they had to do by a certain date, and they had to mail their key in. They could drop it off. We had packaged envelopes we have drop boxes in 2 locations on our campus. And so we stocked that up with envelopes, and they just dropped all their keys into those, or they would mail them in to us.
Awesome. Tiffany? Tiffany, still there?
Sorry, couldn't get the thing to unmute because of the captions. So we still have a good handful of students on campus, and for us, we constantly have the conversation for our front desks is our front desks are staffed by hourly desk assistants, and then some of the hours are also done by our resident advisors. And so we wanted to uphold student employment as much as possible at this time, while also recognizing what is essential and what do we actually need to have happen. And so it's been that like heartbreaking decisions of, we know that there's a financial impact happening to our student employees, but we also can't justify, continuing with regular shifts when that might put people in, unnecessary student interactions. And so we dropped down our desks that were normally open 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. We dropped them down to be 10 to 2 so that it's truly just the essentials of mail and package delivery and acceptance. And we have the lockouts and things like that are all happening with duty and the desk throughout when it's open and when it's not. And so it's just that balance of keeping things open for the essential and what is essential, while also managing the duty staff's time and trying to still pay some folks when we're able to.
Awesome. Yeah, so just to kind of catch everyone up with the chat, Mark shared that they're right around 170 students right now, down from a usual 850, and their desk is still open, just kind of minimal staffing. Leah shares that at Everett Community College, they're also right around 50% occupancy, about 130 students. Janie shares that they've closed their desks and forwarded those front desk phones to their public safety office, and they're down to about 40 students from about 560. Before we move on to that next question, are there any other kind of thoughts, feelings, other questions around the staffing piece? Joey?
Sorry, I thought I'd share this because I think it's kind of cool. We have with the work study, with what the federal government has put out and what PSU is doing with our work study students, we do have university success centers, which is like an academic support that we have other staff positions within our res halls. But for those front desk workers, we're holding virtual office hours, or virtual center hours, I guess. So those front desk workers are kind of being trained on how to set that up, and they are going to be kind of the facilitators of what that virtual office space looks like. And then we are finding, and I'm not 100% sure what the tasks are, But we are finding tasks for our work study students that worked at our front desk. Since they're not able to work there since we've closed it, we are trying to find tasks for them. So fortunately, we didn't have to tell them that unfortunately you don't have a job this term. We are finding tasks for them to do so that way they can still receive some financial benefits.
So Bob asks, for those of y'all at semester institutions, are you changing how your spring applications are being processed and approved?
Hi everyone, it's Bob from Mount Royal, president of NWACUHO as well. Yeah, I just wanted to check in and see if people were having any kind of standards or exceptions being made for students living in residence for spring semester. At Mount Royal, we're having students who want to live in spring to fill out kind of a registration form indicating what their reasons are for wanting to stay during spring, because we have been directed to try and limit the amount of occupancy that we have. So just wanted to get some thoughts around that. Thanks, everyone.
Anyone on semesters who feel comfortable sharing on that piece?
We are on semester at WSU. We were on spring break when the Washington governor was stay home, stay healthy.
So yeah, go ahead and pop it in the chat. Joey asked, what defines spring for semester schools? What does that kind of timeline look like?
Oh, great question. So spring would be kind of after winter semester. So at Mount Royal, that's after April 23rd. And so a spring semester would be kind of April till June, and then summer would be after June.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of us, at least, I'm thinking of like the Washington State schools, that is pretty similar to our winter quarter in terms of timeline. We just began our winter quarter. Well, technically, we're beginning it next week. Our school start got pushed back a week. And so we've still allowed student move-ins. We haven't necessarily detracted that because our building is still staying open. However, we did have quite a few students leave. And so our full building occupancy would be about 400 beds. In the fall and winter, we were around like 85-90% full, and right now we're a little closer to 50%. So we're not kind of like stemming any of those applications at this point, but we're certainly kind of lower occupancy just by cause of students deciding to leave.
Nice, sounds good. Yeah, we're being asked to limit closer to 50, and so yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, so Holly asked, has your compensation model changed at all for RAs or for other staff? Leah responded to that in the chat and just said, previously the RAs were compensated with only free housing. Because desk staff were lost due to move outs, they've transitioned their RA staff to daytime hours. It sounds like at the desk and are paying them hourly for those shifts alongside that free housing. Does anyone else want to talk about their compensation and kind of how that's changed? Nicole?
Something cool we did is with the mandate here in Canada, like post vacation, if you're returning into the country, you have to self-isolate for 14 days. For those people, whether it was like also like visiting scholars coming here, we have used our RAs, our student staff, as basically like a meal delivery kind of service opportunity. So in addition to regular duties that they would be doing on call, we hired them separately at an hourly rate to quite literally go to our central dining hall to pick up like a to-go container, go to the rooms of people self-isolating, like knock on the door, leave the meal in front of it, and then kind of walk away to avoid interaction. But basically we would schedule them for about 3-hour shifts roughly. And so during that, in addition to that, they might try to like have a grocery delivery scheduled to arrive at that time, or like a skip the dishes, like Uber Eats, whatever kind of food delivery. But basically using them as the people to streamline our food delivery, to try to at least help those people who are not able to leave their units for those 2 weeks straight. And then when times were kind of quiet or like off-peak hours, we've also used them just to do like other random tasks, like put up new posters for new on-call phone numbers, or like kind of just random things like that to make sure they're hitting their 3 hours within each shift. But this is kind of just a new thing. Instead of trying to find random volunteers or friends of these people, we figured our student staff are here and they're bored. So let's try to pay them a little extra hourly if we can.
Yeah, thanks. Kay says that because the job responsibilities were changing, they rewrote their positions and had students opt into that new position on and off campus. The stipend of that remained the same if they opted into the positions. They aren't adding a payment for the equivalent if their room is off campus. The on-campus RAs are keeping the same stipend regardless of where they move, and their housing is still included. Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say our compensation hasn't changed, but obviously like job responsibilities pretty majorly changed. So we looked at our structure of kind of how many hours we had our staff doing for things like in-person programming and in-person one-on-ones, which definitely had to change with both a lot of communities dropping down to 5 to 10 students, where they were previously like 30 students. And so just how they were doing programming, how they were doing rounds, and the fact that a lot of them left, so some of them had to be on call more often. So we've really looked at kind of that change, and so it hasn't impacted how much they get paid, but it has impacted that we're getting them to do passive programming, so dropping things off at doors for multiple communities now, so that each of them has about 15-ish students for everyone that's left. So they're dropping off things there, providing new contact information so people know how to get in contact with an RA if they were previously in contact with a different RA, and providing kind of education to people around why we have certain policies in place for COVID-19 and that sort of thing. So no compensation change, but a big kind of responsibility shift.
Yeah, so I think this might be an interesting time to kind of flip the conversation talking more about this like working from home concept. Does anyone want to talk about, are you working from home? What does that mean? Particularly like for your position, the fact that obviously we work in housing, and so working from home is a very strange idea for what it is we're doing. And how has that kind of changed some of the work you're doing or your responsibilities? Yeah, so Chris and I were talking briefly just before this started. So for me personally, I'm not technically working from home. I'm our live-in staff member, and so my office is just across the hallway. And so we made the decision that that wasn't really like a worthwhile thing for me to be doing. So strangely for me, the workday is still fairly normal, and that like I'm still in the same space. It does mean that like I'm interacting with our front desk less often. I'm not seeing students in my office at all. But the actual sort of pattern of, you know, leaving my apartment at whatever time, being in my office for whatever time, that part has actually remained the same. Does anyone else have kind of similar or different experiences with this kind of whole working from home concept? Kay also asks, how are you managing privacy and some of the kind of like delicate confidential conversations if you have a partner or other folks home with you while you're in this working from home situation. Yeah, Tiffany.
Yeah, so our 5 kind of central office folks have done remote work for a couple of weeks, but because we are considered essential, we do a rotation of 1 person in our central office a day. That way there is still in-person support for phones, for emails, and for folks that need like financial paperwork signed. Our professional staff that live in the halls, that's been that balance of question of, well, if your apartment is 6 feet away from your office, what does that look like? And we actually got guidance from our VPSA that said, you know, if you're essential staff, you should still be trying to remotely work as much as possible. And so that helped us kind of tell our live-in staff that as much as you're able to, as long as you can fully participate virtually, you can be in your office doing whatever you need to. So one-on-ones with their student staff are over Zoom. That can be done at home. The virtual office hours can be done at home, but there is that open ability that if you need to be in your office to do that essential work, you can. And then there was a question. For managing privacy, our hall staff actually do university conduct meetings, and so that's been a conversation on our mind as well. And what we've been asking them to do is, you know, if you are working from home, you need to be making sure that if you have a partner living with you, that you're using headphones, that maybe you're using a different room, or that you are engaging in your office for those kinds of things. For the other side of people who we are talking to, Zoom has the way to authenticate who you're speaking with. And so there is the ability to make sure that they are using that university account. And then I believe as a host, you can also request that virtual backgrounds aren't used. And so there's a little bit of those kind of host controls that allow you to kind of see what is the confidential kind of privacy space that you can do.
Awesome. Catherine says she's working from home 4 out of the 5 days. Their office oversees the main office and the student desks, and so it sounds like they're doing a similar thing where there was sort of 1 person in the office each day supporting that desk work. Chris?
Yeah, Becca and I were talking before the conversation started here about, I'm working from home right now, and I'm a live-in staff member, so my office is across campus, which is a little bit further than our other live-in staff member who lives a floor below her office. So I know it's different for everyone, as Becca was kind of saying. I think to answer the question about kind of my partner lives with me, and for example, she's on another call upstairs in our place. So we're trying to kind of space that out as much as we can, both having different sort of confidential conversations, but there is a bit of overlap, and kind of having that understanding of like, I might be talking about this thing, I don't really want to be asked about it afterwards, and that sort of thing. But then as well, we're also, as live-in staff members, as a lot of you probably are as well, we're on call. So that's another question I wanted to pose to the chat, which can be answered a bit after, was what that's looked like for those people who have been asked to start working at home, but then still to be on call and pretty much going maybe back to your office space when you're doing on-call response, and what kind of safety measures you're taking personally in that response. But that can be answered later on if people have other points first.
Awesome. Holly?
Yeah, so as far as staying home, we've tried to move to as remote as possible, but we also hit housing selection when all of this happened, which required somebody to be there to answer phones. And as keys are coming in, it's now my job to disinfect all the keys and put them back into the key box. So there are things where like we still keep getting pulled in, even though they're saying like, stay home. But as far as confidentiality or privacy, utilizing the headphones has been encouraged, but also taking a nod from our counseling services and setting up a safe word or a safe phrase, so that when we're doing something like a conduct meeting, if a student is no longer comfortable speaking, or they say they have somebody come into the space that they don't want to hear these things, it's no longer private for them, they can use that safe word or that safe phrase to let us know that it's no longer confidential or private. And then using that on partners as well. If they like walk into a meeting and you're like, banana sandwich, then they know to like leave.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Joey?
Yeah, so I'm live on, so I can speak to that. We're all have been encouraged to work within our apartments as well, since our offices are closed and students aren't coming to those offices for anything, and everything is being done virtually. We've been told that it's totally fine to work within our apartments. The community walks are a little bit different, and they've provided us with gloves and masks if we so choose to utilize those. Washing our hands constantly. As soon as I get done with the community walk, I come back and wash my hands and disinfect my doorknobs and all that fun stuff. We also, it's a little bit different because I don't oversee a building. So our building managers were doing the community walks on their own, but then they recognized that they had to do them every single day and they were in multiple buildings. So there's 3 RDs on the staff that aren't building managers that they have asked to also help and assist those community walks to limit the amount of times that we're out of our apartments. So now I'm doing community walks 3 days a week. And it only takes about an hour, whereas it was taking them about 2 to 3 hours, and they had to do them every single day. So we were limiting that. Our front office has closed. We've had all of our phones forwarded to our front desk recipient or admin person, and she's working from home. We've set her up with computers at home, so she has 2 monitors, and she's able to do what she can, her role remotely, and she's answering phones, and then we shut it off at the 5 o'clock hour. Like I said, our front desk is being managed by our director and our associate director, so they're doing all the keys and everything like that. And then we've moved all of our residents into singles at no additional charge. So once we found out what was happening, we asked the residents that were returning to campus to let us know if their roommate was also going to be returning, and if so, we were going to do our best to make sure to put everyone into singles. And so far, that's been working in our favor. We have our relay team has not gone in to clean rooms until after the 14-day quarantine deadline, and then they're going in to clean the rooms, and then we're starting to that move process right now. We still accepted students who were moving in with us for this term, pending a conversation with them. We needed to know that this was their only option for a living space in order for us to accept them moving in, but we still had a few residents that were moving in this term. But like I said, everyone has moved into singles. And then we also brought in our room placement person and offered her a room on campus. So she's usually a live-off position, but her family is moving to Arizona, and so they sold her house, and she didn't have anywhere to go. But also for bandwidth purposes, we've given her a spot on campus, so now she's on campus and is one of our frontline people as well.
Awesome. Any other thoughts kind of on this, I guess, logistics of working from home piece, either from live-on folks or kind of what Chris was talking about for live-offs who may be responding to incidents in kind of an on-call capacity and what that looks like?
I can speak to the responding to incidents real quick too, sorry. So usually with lockouts, we tell our RAs to tell them it's gonna be about 15 to 20 minutes. I don't know if RAs are doing that or not. When I get a call about a lockout, I tell them it's gonna be half an hour. And I'm not trying to be an inconvenience to them, but 9 times out of 10 when it comes to our lockouts, we're getting a call back halfway across campus saying, oh, someone let me in the front door, or, oh, I got in, or, oh, I found my keys. So I don't rush to a lockout because I'm not going to walk halfway across campus to get that phone call to be like, oh, just kidding, I got in the building. As far as any other incidents, I think it's the same thing that I think someone else had mentioned with their RA staff. I'm standing at the door or I'm asked if they're at the door, I ask them to take a few steps back. I also take a few steps back. So just trying to maintain that distance as much as possible. And then anything that we're concerned that might require a little bit more time, or we are asking our campus public safety to help us out as well, just to limit the amount of interactions with people. So it just depends on the situation and how we're handling it with our public safety or not.
So Catherine asked, has everyone managing refunds for residents who've left? Kathleen says that at Linfield, they're treating them as housing credit, so they may end up being a part of the refund if the student's balance is paid, or it can pay part of the student's bill for the year. The credit is only for the last 9 weeks of the semester, which is when they made the decision to close their hall. And it looks like Tiffany posted the link to how Washington State is handling that. I'll say here at Bellevue College, this all kind of started rolling about 2 weeks before the end of our winter quarter. And so we made the decision that regardless of whether students had been pre-approved, if they moved out by the end of winter quarter, they would not receive any penalty for breaking their spring quarter contract. And post that move out date, which was the 21st, we've kind of had an escalating fee based on when they're leaving. So right now, if students move out before the 8th, which is our first day of classes, they're just receiving like a charge for like their daily prorated rent. And they're receiving the refund of the rest of that spring balance. And then as of the 8th, when classes start, it reverts back to our contractual, if they break their contract, they get X fees, which really is just because this began again so kind of early in our winter quarter that we were able to do that and kind of head it off early. Bob?
Yeah, it's a very similar process to what we're doing at Mount Royal University in Calgary as well. Students were encouraged to move out before the end of March, and if they did so, they would receive April's rent back to them, and so that'll be issued to their account, which then can be used to pay for their housing fees next year, or they can choose to get that actual those funds back to them. That won't be processed until May at least. We still need to go into units to assess damages and cleanliness, and so in terms of their damage deposit, that won't be granted until we're able to get in there. We will be a little bit more lenient, knowing that some students needed to move out very quickly and may not have had necessary amount of time to do quality cleaning. However, we still need to make sure there's no massive holes in the walls.
It looks like Joey's also posted the link to their kind of response information if anyone wants that. We're kind of right around 10 minutes here. Is there any sort of last burning questions or thoughts, feelings that people wanted to share or kind of get feedback on?
I just wanted to ask a question about kind of how people are staying productive, kind of working from home right now. I know that it's like, I would say I'm generally productive, but it's the headspace aspect of kind of being in a different space than maybe an office, than maybe usually a working environment, and how maybe people have figured out separating themselves from kind of working and being at home a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'll say for me at least, something that I've seen kind of circulating on social media that's been really helpful for me is sort of making the mental distinction between you're not necessarily working from home, you're at home during a crisis and also trying to work. And so it's true that like we're trying to like stay productive and like do as much as we can, but also kind of giving yourself the grace of there's also just a lot happening, and so sometimes maybe we don't get as much done. Just because kind of like you said, the headspace just isn't there. Yeah. Anyone else willing to share kind of how they're handling the productivity in the situation?
This is Jeannie from St. Martin's. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so it's really funny because I'm an operations person, so I did closing and we're doing room selection at the same time for next year. So two big processes that usually take 2 months. We've had to replan and do in 2 weeks, so that's a little fun. In terms of the work-life balance, it's actually been a little bit better with this because I think people understand we're responding to like what the most emergent needs are. So there's a lot of additional tasks that have melted off from our department. And so we're very, or at least I try to make the distinction for myself of being a 9 to 5. I'm usually not, but I'm like, nope, no, we're 9 to 5 and really trying to work on that. And also when we're having to work late or later in time for our staff to be able to take half days, full days, flexed and whatnot. So we try as a department to like kind of acknowledge that, recognize like last week was a really rough week for us to balance, but this week has been much better doing that 9 to 5 and trying to do check-ins with staff to make sure everyone's actually heading home. We're similar to other buildings like you, Becca, like in that we work like very, very close to our offices are, so there's not walking across campus. Our exposure is just walking down the hall or et cetera. So a lot of us are working in the office, but trying to work from home as well, at least for me. But I'm also more high risk because I'm very pregnant, so.
Awesome. Any other kind of feedback or other questions as we're maybe wrapping up? I'll say one quick thing something that has come on our radar very recently that I think is probably going to start not only impacting all of us, but impacting Northwest NWACUHO is how are people seeing this affecting funds for the coming year, particularly when it comes to maybe travel and professional development? I know for us right now, we're kind of on we have no idea yet. We're just not expecting much. Our housing program is self-support, so we'll probably have a little more flexibility than the rest of our campus. But we're expecting the campus guidance to be for the coming school year for pretty much low or no professional development and travel funding. Anyone else having kind of similar or different experiences with that? Awesome. Well, it sounds like we might kind of be reaching the end. Is there any last stuff before we kind of post the feedback and wrap up? Oh, preparing for RA training, and what is that looking like for folks?
We're in a fascinating spot where, so we're a semester system, and so our move-in and begins mid-August, so our trainings start early July and kind of roll through. But our university is trying to do a makeup graduation, and I believe they've announced it in August. We also are the space that hosts a fairly large Washington conference where they all kind of converge to us. And that normally happens in May, and I guess there's been some discussion of that happening later. And so we're sort of like, what does that mean when we need these large university spaces for our training? But now we may have to fight, maybe not fight, but now we have to be aware that some large university events are going to happen at the same time. And so we have no idea what that's going to look like. And it's just one of those like, well, I guess training is going to be outside this year.
I can speak on kind of our training piece right now. We just kind of had a meet and greet, or a virtual meet and greet, with our new team for next year through Google Hangouts like this. And so looking at that, we're trying to tell them when move-in will be and things like that. And so a lot of our dates are tentative right now, of course, but we were also looking at kind of what our training schedule is going to look like for the end of August. And I think right now we're building a schedule, like, if everything goes back to normal and we're all good and happy and whatever, then this is what this will look like. But I think the other thing that we're going to do is start building in, like, if we can't go to certain in-person tasks, if we can only do half in-person, things like this, what that will look like, and kind of building a contingency plan for if we can do in-person and if we have to do most of it online or in kind of broader open spaces where there's less contact.
Yeah, I know for us, our training is end of August, beginning of September, because we're quarter, so we're starting later in September. So I think that's a conversation that we're just going to kind of avoid having until we really have to kind of get there. We actually haven't started selection for next year's RAs yet. The application is supposed to open up the first day of school, so we're kind of just treading into that one slowly. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming. This was a really great conversation. Hopefully we were able to kind of get through some questions or concerns that people were having. This will hopefully be posted up to the Northwest NWACUHO YouTube by Monday. So if you want to rewatch it, or if you want to send it to someone or whatever, it should be up there. The link for the feedback form is posted in the chat toward the bottom. If you could do that, that would be really helpful, especially with trying out this kind of funky roundtable version of this. It'll help us figure out kind of how to do that in the future, if it worked, if it didn't. And if you're interested in presenting for the coming months, either doing like a presentation or maybe hosting some kind of roundtable thing, just let Chris or I or anyone on the committee know, and we can kind of get that set up. So thank you all again. Have a good weekend.